The Five Nights at Freddy's games, without a doubt, has a few of the most iconic and memorable locations in the horror genre. It's quite interesting how different the settings are in each game, yet they all infamously achieve the same goal: creating fear through the environment. Despite the entire lore being centered around creepy animatronics, there is no denying that this feeling of fear spawns from the very building that you were trapped within. However, it's not just the fact that these animatronics are out to kill us throughout the games, but rather how the architecture surrounding it elevates the sense of fear, tension, and anxiety within the players. From the sense of confinement created by the layout, to the visual decay of the walls. Although having several games, books, a movie, and even songs centered around the story, we will be focusing specifically on the location of the first game, as I believe this precedent perfectly illustrates how to create a feeling of unease within the player. In today's analysis, we're not only looking at the elements of the settings that enhance the game, but we're also going to be critically analysing the restaurant from an architectural perspective. This is Analysing Architecture. Although the first game took place sometime between 1992 and 1993, the restaurant was estimated to have been constructed and established around 1988. This is important to understand because this would be the period where real-life chains such as Chuck E. Cheese and Showbiz Pizza Place would start to gain a lot of popularity. Looking at some of these real-life restaurants, there are many similarities to the locations featured in the first game, such as the 80s retro style, the over-exuberant decor, and even the layout of the main stage. But of course, this wasn't unintentional, but rather a conscious design choice to make the structure feel a bit more grounded. But what makes the Freddy Fazbear's restaurants different? Although these real-life restaurants are by no means comforting, there are a few architectural elements that have been distorted in a way that makes this game just that much more terrifying, turning the 80s retro style into a dull and mute tone, making the energetic decor worn down and unkempt, and making it so that the layout feels almost inescapable and claustrophobic. Before I begin to delve into the floor plan of the restaurant, I must state that because the games are fictional, so are the buildings. Using as many sources as I could find, I attempted to recreate an accurate floor plan of the game, but of course this may not be exactly accurate. To be completely honest with you, from an architectural standpoint, the floor plan could use some improvement. If there's anything that this plan can tell you, it's that it by far does not meet modern day building regulations. From the lack of emergency exits to the robotic circulation, Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria is an example of how to not construct and lay out a restaurant for kids, but rather how to perfectly create a space of tension and anxiety. One of the techniques in the floor plan is the use of enclosed spaces. If I were to pitch this floor plan to my tutor, he'll probably shit on me. But most importantly, he'll question the waste of space and why I opted to fill the entire room with tables instead of allowing for more space for freedom or other activities such as arcade games. With such an enclosed space, no consideration for functionality and movement, and because this restaurant is for kids, you're just asking for an accident to happen. But when we're looking at this from a gameplay perspective, it's quite clever. Although you can't actually move in the game, the use of these narrow hallways, cramped rooms, and the lack of space for movement creates a feeling of claustrophobia. Because the distance between the tables is so tight, and the rooms and hallways have little to no mobility, it creates a sense of confinement and vulnerability within the player, especially when you hop on the cameras and see this bro staring at you, knowing you can't just run past him. Another method featured in this floor plan is the feeling of anticipation. A lot of architects design around anticipation, It's an excellent way of creating suspense before a climax, such as going through a long hallway and having the reward of a nice view at the end. However, the Five Nights at Freddy's games distorts this by using long hallways to instead heighten the player's anxiety as the night progresses. At the start of the game, when all the animatronics are on their stages, you feel a sense of calm because for now, they're nowhere near you. But as time passes, the level of anticipation, or in this case, anxiety, increases as these animatronics slowly creep up closer towards you, through the main hall, to the hallway, to right outside your office. The same technique actually being used in the second game. I think a strange thing about this floor plan is how the building features only one way in and out. First off, that's a massive safety concern. But secondly, it's weird to instead see the security office with two entrances. I don't think it's a bad thing at all, but contrasting this with the actual building itself, the office feels almost inviting for the animatronics to come towards you, making use of its limited escapes. Returning to the fact that we can't actually move in the game, you think it's pointless for there to even be exits. But I feel as if that subconscious feeling of being trapped and knowing there is nowhere to escape within the environment intensifies the urgency of the gameplay experience. This level of unease and tension created by the floor plan of the structure is only further enhanced by the visual architectural elements, including both the materiality and the lighting. In a lot of restaurants, the use of color palettes is an essential way of evoking a sense of emotion and setting the tone for the atmosphere. Fast food chains often utilize bright solid colors and materials to make the space feel more inviting, and Five Nights at Freddy's uses this as well. But because these materials are subject to decay and dilapidation, it instead creates an opposite effect, making the space feel unwelcoming. The use of dim lighting and shadows further adds to the atmosphere of suspense, forcing players to rely on limited visibility. Because the walls appear to have mold and the building is so dark, I don't think it meets building code regulations. But as players, we understand that Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria is by no means a place for fun or entertainment, but rather a hunting ground for the animatronics. I think one of the most terrifying elements of Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria is how grounded in reality it is. Many horror games rely solely on disturbing creatures or jump scares, and many would argue that Five Nights at Freddy's falls under that category. But what I find so interesting about this game and the restaurant we are set within is how it takes a real-life element and twists it in a way, taking advantage of not only our fear of the uncanny, but also our natural primordial fear of the dark and the fear of isolation. Although subjective, when looking at the restaurant from an architect's perspective, it could use a lot of work. But after analysing the interior floor plan, the materiality, as well as the lighting, I believe Scott Cawthon achieved something greater and much more sinister. From a gameplay experience, this restaurant functions more than just as a space for the animatronics to roam, but rather a construct that not only targets, but feeds off our emotions.